Hello, my marketing and entrepreneur friends. Welcome back to another exciting episode of the Let's Talk Marketing podcast, where I, your host, Katja Allison, get to explore the latest trends, techniques, and strategies in marketing. Now, in today's episode, I have the pleasure of interviewing Heidi Schalk, who is a business strategy and visibility coach, also a best-selling author, and a host of her own podcast. She has been featured on major networks like Fox, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and has been recognized as one of the top 30 inspiring entrepreneurs to watch in 2024. Now, this episode is a little different than the others I normally do because we're chatting about women empowerment in business. So we dive into mentorship, community, and what it means to be a woman in business, whether you're starting your own or you're just a woman of the world and in business like myself. Now, we discuss the common pitfalls that women in business face, like perfectionism and the tendency to lone wolf it. We dive a lot into the lone wolfing towards the end of the episode, so definitely listen to it, along with strategies to build confidence and embrace vulnerability as a strength. We both believe in the power of being seen and heard. This episode will leave you with actionable advice on how to cultivate empowerment in you and around you, and you will not want to miss this. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and let's dive into it. Let's talk marketing. Heidi, welcome to the Let's Talk Marketing podcast. I'm super excited to have you on here.
Thank you so much, Katja, for having me. I am just as excited, if not more, to be here with you.
Love it. Now, normally we do a deep dive about marketing and marketing strategy, which we're always going to touch a little bit on that. But today's episode is a little different because we're really going to talk about women in business and women in leadership. Before we do dive into that, I'd love for the audience to get to know you a little bit. So let's talk about you. What are you currently doing? What is your current role?
Right now, I am a business strategy and visibility coach. I am visibility is my jam because it stems from my story. And we can dive into that if you want. But 6.5 years ago, when I started my business, and the catalyst for my business was my kids. I was moving through a divorce, but I had a huge fear of being seen. And I didn't realize that until I decided to go into business. Then I'm like, oh, wait, I have to show up. I have to actually share my story, share my journey, get vulnerable, and then go press that live button and put content out. I'm like, I thought people were just going to, I was just going to tell them what I did and they were going to show up. And so that was one of the biggest hurdles I had when I started my business. So visibility, I love working with women on helping them be seen and empowering them to be seen in whether they're in in leadership or in coaching or consulting or whatever that looks like, whether it's putting your content out there on social media, whether it's coming up with your offer or even getting immediate exposure such as podcast, TV, or print publications.
Love that. What is it that you love about what you do? But with the good, there is the bad. I'm going to ask you, what, if anything, could I pluck out of your day-to-day of your job to make it perfect? So let's start with the good. What is it that you love about what you currently do?
I love when my clients get a win, when they do something, when they have this fear, and we're working with them on moving through this fear that they have, whether it's hitting that live button or whether they're really comfortable with that. And I'm like, okay, great, let's branch out and get you on a podcast. And I can see the fear creep into them, and then they overcome it and they get that they do it for the first time. And I'm like, how do you feel? And they just feel they're lit up and they're empowered. They get their first client. That's what I love on the day to day.
Love it. Now, what can I pluck out? I've got a wand. Let me pluck something out. What do you not like?
What do I don't like? I don't like editing.
That's fair. And you are not the only one to have said that. It's very time consuming, huh?
It's very time consuming. So if you find someone to do the things that you don't like to do. So that's what I am working on. I'm looking for a very good editor.
I love it. I may have a couple names for you. That's what I will say. Okay, so that's what you loved, and now you've told me what you would pluck out. Now, I would also imagine that you kind of have to stay up to date with what's happening just kind of what's happening in business, what's happening like in marketing, what's happening in general to really kind of align that strategy for from a coaching perspective. So how are you staying up to date on trends?
That's a great question because things are changing all the time. When you just like take a look at social media, the algorithm is always changing. The platforms are always changing. What's working? Should we use hashtags? Should we not use hashtags? Are we
Yeah.
allowed to post this link? Are we not allowed to post this link? Should we post this link in the caption or should we post this link in the comments? Like there's always things changing. AI is like something that came on in the last 6 months with a bang, right?
Yeah.
Came out really fast and furious, and we need to be able to keep up with that. So I love this question. It really getting involved with collaborating, getting building relationships with other entrepreneurs, getting coaching myself. I have mentors. I am always learn. If you want to learn and grow, which I need to do because I need to be able to coach my clients and because we work in social media to keep
Yeah.
up with themselves. So I'm always looking for the mentors who are the leaders in their space and learning from them. So it's really important as a business, when you're building a business or growing or scaling, that you are working with mentors. And I have many of them that I work with.
Oh, I think that this is actually a really great segue into, what we're going to talk about for the entire podcast. And it's, not on the list of questions initially, but you said it. And I have such a strong, like, knee jerk reaction to the word mentorship, or maybe it's just even mentorship in general. So, what do you think a good mentor should have? Like, should I have a mentor? Should I not have a mentor? When do I decide if I need a mentor versus not?
Those are a lot of great questions. Let's start with the last one. When should I have a mentor? And my feeling is, and it's not because I'm a coach, this is exactly what I did. I got a mentor right from the beginning. And so my opinion is that when you're starting a business, the first thing you should do is hire a mentor. And that comes along with really finding a mentor that you've vetted. You've spoken with them, you've seen their results, you also can trust them, and you have similar, what's the word I'm looking for? Values. Because it's really
Yes.
important that you're aligned value wise with your mentor. Because if you're not, it's not going to work. You're not going to end up respecting them and taking their guidance. You asked me another question with that as far as mentorship, and I don't remember what it was.
No, that's okay. I threw a lot of questions at you in regards to that. I mean, like the big key one is like at what point do you get a mentor, but also like what do you look for when it comes to yeah, I want to ask you to be my mentor. I think that the reason that I have such a reaction to it is because it feels a little bit like dating. And maybe it should be like dating, right? You need to make sure, like you said, your values align, but I don't even know what it is that I'm looking for in a mentor, let alone like what happens once I find someone. Like, what does that relationship look like, right? So I think that will be my next question is what does that relationship look like? Let's say I have identified that right person, we've reached out, they've agreed to it, and now we meet. What is the expectation of like mentorship? Is it I have a problem and I'm coming to you? Is it they're suggesting things? What does that actual relationship look like?
Well, it depends on the actual coach or mentor that you're working with and the program that they provide. Are you looking for what is it that you want? What are your needs and your goals? And that's one thing. When I work with someone, I sit down. That's the very first thing we do is an onboarding call. And I think this is a really important piece of when you're looking for a mentor. What does Ask them what do the
Yeah.
next steps look like for me, right? Because it could be group coaching. What is that going to look like in that kind of atmosphere and that kind of environment? Is that going to work for you? Do you want more one-on-one support, right? And when I
Yeah.
started, I not that the mentor was bad, they were great, it was the wrong mentor for me. It
Yeah.
was a huge investment for me, way more than I could afford at the time. And I learned quickly it it wasn't the right fit. And I didn't know that once I paid all this money, there were additional fees on, in the back end, which were thousands of dollars on top of what I already invested. So being a single mom coming out of a divorce and now launching a business, that was a hard hit for me. So,
Yeah.
I love, I flat out tell people when I talk to them, like, this is what the investment is. And these are the additional costs that you're going to incur along the way. And these are the costs of doing business. But this is what these costs are going to look like. So they get to go back and go, okay, this, being transparent, really being open and honest with what, what's expected of me from them, with them, from me to them, for them, and
Yeah.
what's expected of them for me, because I'm a results driven person. So I need to make sure that we have an understanding of what's expected. That's why it's really important for me to have that phone call. Not everybody has the phone call. There's a lot of people that just put out a program and then you can buy it off the cuff. You need to know what you're getting into before you sign on that dotted line or you invest in that.
I love that you've pointed out that there is a cost to it, right? Because um, I think that sometimes the mentality is I'm just going to find someone in business that is doing the thing that I want them to do or that I want to be doing. And I'm going to reach out to them and I'm going to ask them to be my mentor. But what you're describing is something a lot more structured, which, can really work for some people, but also knowing that there is a cost associated with it. And it's not a bad thing to invest in yourself, right? Like, I think we all have to get a little bit more comfortable with like, yeah, there is a cost, but you're investing in yourself. And ultimately, that's what the goal is. Now, when it comes to either starting a business or being a woman in business, because I think this goes both ways, what are some of the common mistakes that you see women in business do?
Is this when you're starting out or when we're starting
Yeah,
out?
I mean, let's start with starting out, but I also like I'm a woman in business now. What are some mistakes that you see? Because I would imagine that you've talked to people who are in kind of my position where like I'm not starting out, I'm not starting my own business, but I am a woman in business and I'm kind of in the middle of it and I know that I want to grow. What next? So let's start with the if you're when you're just starting out and maybe you are starting your own business. What are some of
This
those common
I love
mistakes?
both of these. This is a great question. I would say the biggest mistake I see, because women, we juggle a lot of hats. So let's
Mhm.
start there. As a woman in business, many of us have kids, many of us have a partner, we're building a home. There's a lot of hats that we juggle. And so I would say the biggest mistake I see, and this is something I did, is lone wolf, going at it
Lo
alone, not lone
Lone
wolf.
wolf. Oh,
Yes, lone wolfing
interesting.
it,
Okay.
because for women, like, hi, I'm Heidi. I'm a recovering perfectionist. When my kids were little, I always wanted to have the best of the best for the parties, and I would stay up all night making the tulle skirts for their parties and all the things. And I think
Yeah.
as women in business, we want to have everything perfect before we actually take action. So perfectionism and then lone wolfing it, feeling like we can't, if we ask for support, if we ask for help, then we're weak. And this is like,
Mm,
in business, it could be seen as a man's world. That's what it was for a long, long
yeah.
time. And so if we ask questions, or we say we need help, we don't have it all figured out, and then we're also comparing ourselves to other people who might be out there, like, quote unquote, crushing it from what we see on social media. We don't really know what's going on behind the scenes, but we're like,
Yeah.
oh my God, they're crushing it. Why is this not working for me? But we're also scared to tell people, like, hey, I don't have it all together. Right. And I think as
No.
women, we need to open that door and say, listen, I've got you, and it's okay not to have it all together. And we're here to support each other up. And because I always say, I'm like, we're better together. And I think the more women that get vulnerable and they share, like, hey, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm working towards, these are my goals, I don't need to have it all together, I do need help. I think that opens the door for a lot more women that will be successful in business.
Mm, I love that. And the lone wolf, that's so well articulated because I think oftentimes as women, we do think we have to do it on our own or else it's not gonna, see, this is me projecting. We have to do it on our own or else I didn't earn the win Do you know what I
But
mean? Like, I think
yes,
sometimes there's this
yes.
mentality that like I didn't earn it if I didn't do it all myself. If I didn't build every little piece of like my, you know, my I was going to say my masterpiece, but that sounds very artful. But do you know what I mean? I think sometimes like we kind of fall prey to that. Now what about the other ends? Like that's someone who is just kind of starting out, but what about someone like me? I'm in business. I'm not a solopreneur, but I'm still a woman in business and I want to grow. Like what are some what are some common mistakes I make? And I guarantee you that I've made them.
I think the one of those mistakes is this is a catch-22 because I always say you should hire before you're ready. But I also think a big mistake is, and I made this mistake, I'm sharing all the mistakes I made, scaling too fast. Scaling too fast, like really thinking
Mm,
that we need like bigger is better when it's not necessarily true. And just thinking that we need to hire more people on, and to like I shared with you earlier, what I always wanted to do with the party is like trying to keep up with the Joneses and comparing ourselves to other people out there in the market. We can have a successful career, a very highly successful business with a small team versus trying to go big too fast.
what are some tips for this is going to sound like a silly ask, but like, what are some tips for ensuring that you don't grow too fast, right? That you don't put the cart before the horse, that you're not comparing yourself to the Joneses. I actually don't even know if there are tips that you can give for something like that. I don't know if it's like a mental state or an actual, like, hey, if you're doing this, like, maybe this is at this point you need to, I don't know, have a check-in with either your mentor or yourself or your spouse or whatever. Like what are some tips so that I kind of can look for those warning signs?
Yeah, I think we're going to always check out other people and see what they're doing. And I think it's important that we do. You should be researching other people in your space who are doing what you're doing and are where you want to be. That's really important because we don't need to reinvent the wheel and try and start something from scratch new. Like, we don't, that's the great thing about social media. There's so much proof out there, reels, copy, all the things that are working. And there's so many people that start. This is another mistake people made. I got to do it myself and make it up. And when there's so much out there that's already working that you can emulate and make your own. So we don't have to like create the new cart. And so I mean, when we're doing that, researching other people, it's hard not to compare ourselves to other, but we don't want to
Yeah.
compare our chapter 2 to someone else's chapter 20. This is your journey.
Mm,
Enjoy the journey. And I think that's another mistake that people make, entrepreneurs make, in business, or people in business. We don't take time to enjoy the journey. And really celebrate our little wins along the way. We're so focused on that end goal, that we don't celebrate those little goals that we've crushed in order to get to that big goal. And by not doing that, by the time we reach that big goal at the end, it's not
yeah.
even exciting anymore because we're already on to that next goal.
I love that. I like to think of it as you're saying that. I think of them as like the pennies of your success. You don't think like a penny is worth anything, like it's just a penny, right? But when you add up all of those pennies, those turn into dollars, they turn into 20s, they turn into hundreds, they turn into thousands, right? Like they really build up. So I love that that's like the angle that you're taking on it. Now, I'm like I said, a woman in business. I feel like I'm really strong, but sometimes I lack confidence. And I know that I'm not alone in this confidence feeling, right? I think that I say multiple times a week, not multiple times a day. So I am growing as a person, because it used to be every day. But multiple times I'll be like, this person has me questioning my career choices. Am I doing it right? Like what kind of advice do you have for women building confidence in themselves and their abilities?
I one thing that I this is where mentorship matters. Like you said, going to your
Yeah.
mentor, going to somebody, having a support group, having a support system, having somebody that you trust that you can go to. And many times it's not people in our own, like in our inner circle, right? Many,
Yeah.
especially in the entrepreneurial space, many of our, I know for me personally, they didn't understand it. Like, why don't you just go get a job, or why don't you do this? Like, because they didn't understand my drive, like not my drive, but my vision, or
Yeah.
the urge that I was just drawn to this. So it's not like we can just switch that off. So finding community, people that you can go to, you can say, listen, like I talked about earlier, I don't have this all together. This is what I'm doing. What do you think? Can I get your eyes on this and get your feedback? But when it comes to confidence, and I learned this from a mentor and I share it, but I'm not going to take credit for it, is every time that we keep the commitment to ourselves, we add a coin in the confidence bucket. So just think about having a jar next to you. And every time that we follow through with even the smallest thing that we tell ourselves we're going to do, we're adding up. We're like dropping a quarter or a penny, like you mentioned, a penny in that confidence bucket. And every time we do that, those pennies are filling. And that means our confidence is going up and up and up. And that's the subconscious thing. So just think about, like, if I was to say, I'm going to start exercising tomorrow, and 30 days goes by and I say that every day and I don't do it, my subconscious doesn't trust me anymore. So when I say I'm going to do this, it's like, no, you're not, Heidi, because you didn't do this little thing that you said you were going to do. So just by so starting small is like with little things and then making sure that you follow through with them. That's a great way to start building your confidence, because confidence equals trust. And as you are following through with those tiny little things that you tell yourself, you're building up that trust in yourself, and your confidence is going to start growing. And every time we're doing something new, obviously we're not fully confident at it. It's scary, right? The fear kicks in. But if you just take that baby step, or you reach out to somebody, like for your listeners, reach out to Kat, say, hey, I'm starting something new. Find somebody that you trust that you can reach out to and say, hey, I'm starting something new. I'm going live for the first time. Would you be able to come on there and just support me? Like, ask for support.
What's great about what you said is the asking for support. And I love that. Truly, everyone listening, reach out to me. I actually do respond to every single message, even if it is like just offering business or whatever. I always take the call, because I really, truly believe that I have to be able to pay it forward. Like, I've really busted my ass to get to where I am in my career. And I own that, and I feel good. And I'm still insecure. And some days I still lack the confidence, and I still want more, and all of those things. And I really want to be incredibly open about it. And not only that, I want to go through the doors that are opened for me, and I want to keep the doors open for the people behind me. I don't just want to walk through that door. So how do you advise people, or maybe like, what's your opinion or thoughts on really kind of creating an inclusive environment for other women, right? And it kind of speaks to that community that you had mentioned earlier as well, right? But like, how can I foster that? Is it just taking those calls? Is it like reaching out? Is it proactive or reactive? Or maybe it's a balance of both. What are your thoughts on that?
This is fantastic, because I think, like I said earlier, we're better together. And I think for women, it's scary to reach out to another woman sometimes. But it's really important. And sometimes you need to take the first step and move through maybe that anxiety or fear of reaching out to somebody, because especially in the online space, it can be it's very lonely. Like, I sit home, I'm in it's very dark because it's evening here, and I'm in my family room because my office doesn't have great internet sometimes. So we had a lot of wind today. So I'm like, nope, I'm going to be in here today with Kat. But just being able to find that support system. And like you said, answering those messages, and being engaging, asking questions back. Some people are nervous to even reach, you have people reaching out to you. Some people may be nervous of doing that, and just like really asking questions, getting to know them. And for you all listening, doing the same. And there's one thing else I wanted to share. When you are, I'll share this, because I heard, this is something I learned from a mentor too, and I'm not going to take credit, but there's a word that I think about whenever I'm feeling stuck. It's called hope. And it stands for help one person every day. So if you just make an effort to reach out to one person every day and build that connection, by the end of the year, you've made 365 connections that you would have never made otherwise. And you never know what those connections are going to bring you, and vice versa, what you're going to be able to do for someone else in that process. But when you're stuck, what I tell my clients is take a step back, stop what you're doing, if you're like frustrated, if you're having one of those days where it's just not ice cream and sprinkles that day and it's really frustrating day, then stop and go and focus out. Who can I reach out to? How can I help someone else? Because when you're helping someone else, it's taking all that pressure off of you, and that
Yeah.
releases the anxiety, it releases the stress, it releases the stuckness. And many times you reach out to somebody and you go, how can I help you? Guess what happens? That law of reciprocity kicks in, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden they want to help you. And then guess what? That stuckness that you had, you can now share with them, and they may have the answer for you.
I love that. And honestly, we probably should have started with your story, but it's okay. We're going to reverse engineer this, and we are going to now lean into what your story is, because after everything that you've said, I want to know what inspired you to get into just kind of coaching women in business.
Well, like I said, when I first started, it was 6.5 years ago, and I found myself divorced, and I had been a stay-at-home mom up until this point. Like the house and the kids were my job, my role, and the finances were his, and I had no idea what was going on with finances. And he made, when we first were married, we were struggling. Then he would make six figures, multiple six figures, and then into seven figures at the end, and then there was nothing. So I had to figure out, what am I going to do? And the one thing I did know was that I was very clear on I had no clue what I was going to do. I was really scared. So I was really lost, but I did know, and I was super clear on, I wanted to be home with my kids. So quickly I found my why, which is one thing when we start a business, you really need to be clear on what is your why, because then when those days are not ice cream and sprinkles, you're going to need to refocus, like reconnect with that
Yeah.
why that keeps you driving. And mine always was, I wanted to be home with my kids. That being said, I did work two jobs as I was building my business, and I did burn out. So I actually left my business for about a year and a half, because I was hitting that rat race of the cycle with the two jobs and the pickups of the kids of two different schools, and my kids were navigating new schools, and my son was
Yeah.
moving through ADHD diagnosis. There was a lot of things happening, and I had to give something up, and I'm like, they were getting the worst of me, and I'm like, something has to give, and that thing that had to give at that time was my business. But I say that because my why brought me back. That wanting to be home with my kids is what brought me back. And when I first hired my first coach, I was in this group, and like I shared with you earlier, I quickly realized that I was like, wait a minute, people got to see me. I got to show up online. And I had this huge fear of going live and showing up online because of my past. I was a stay-at-home mom. My children had been in private school. I was homeroom mom for both of my kids. I was co-chair of the auction committee for that school. I was there probably at least once or twice a week. What are these women, these moms going to think of me? Like, who is she? I had a huge fear of judgment, that people were going to judge me. Like, who is she to just now show up online and start this business, right? And at the end of the day, I got to learn. So if any of you hearing this has this fear, I got to learn quickly that people don't think about you as much as you think they're thinking about you. They've got their own things going on.
That's true.
So, but I had this huge fear of going live and being seen and putting my message out there. And luckily for me, in this group, which was a blessing, was a woman in there, and her and I became friends. And she was crushing her business. She had no fear of being seen. So she was out there doing the thing, and her and I became friends, and she challenged me, and she said, so we're in the DMs in the Messenger and Facebook, and she's like, hey, I have this challenge for you. Will you accept it? And I trusted her at this point. I'm like, sure, what could it be? She goes, great, I want you to go live in the Facebook group right now, and your topic is my breakdown to my breakthrough. And I was like, immediately, Kat, I started shaking. My chest got tight. My throat was closing. And I'm like, oh.
My chest is tight for you, and that has already happened.
I'm like, hell to the no. I can't do that. She's like, you can do it, and I'm here to support you. But I'm in England. She's in England. I'm in Florida. Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm on the other side of the pond, and it's after midnight. I get to go to bed. So I got off with her. I went in the group, and as soon as I started talking, I had no idea what I was talking about. And my chest started getting tight. My throat started closing. I was shaking. But not only that, I was crying. But it wasn't a cute, pretty girl cry. It was an ugly, horrific, bawling cry. And I had no tissues or anything to support me in it. So I'm like wiping my face with my hands. I was so traumatized, like the stress and the anxiety was kicking in so strong, a migraine started coming on. So I got through it and I hung it up, and we got back in the DM, and she's like, that was great. And I'm like, no, it wasn't. And she said, I have another challenge for you. Will you accept it? And I'm like, well, I'm not dead, and it can't be any worse than that was. So, and she goes, great. I want you to go live for the next 5 days. And I said, good night. And I shut Facebook and I went to bed because my migraine was killing me. I woke up the next morning and I was scared to death to go into this Facebook group. I'm like, I can only imagine the comments that are there because it was utterly horrific. And I go inside and I was just blown away by the support that I received. People were saying, thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for showing up so raw and real. Thank you for, doing it scared, because I've had the same fear. And I'm like, I thought I was the only one who had a fear of going live and being seen. And then other people were like, you know what? I don't have this fear, but I have this fear that's holding me back in my business. And now you've inspired me to take action today on that. One of the coaches inside the program did an impromptu training around my live stream, around the power of vulnerability and doing it scared and moving through the fear. Now, Kat, that did not get me over my fear of being seen. It took
it wasn't like a wand. You could not pluck that out.
No, it wasn't a magic wand that somebody said poof and I was healed. It didn't work that way. But now I can go live on a dime. I can come on podcasts, and I now have a podcast called Be She, which stands for Be Seen, Be Heard, Be Empowered, all around visibility and empowering women to show up for themselves and to show up powerfully in the world and create the ripple that they want to create and live the dreams that they want to create for themselves. So that's part of my story. That's how I got started. I hope that, that was supportive for people listening.
No, I love it. We have a lot of similarities, believe it or not. My kids are older now, but when they were younger, I also went through divorce. I was also a stay-at-home mom. And then the re-entry back into the workforce was really interesting. And I wasn't a solopreneur, but man, I was hustling to try to get a job. The gap that you have to explain is really interesting. And to me, I don't hate men. I am remarried, so I clearly don't. So I don't want it to seem like I don't think that men go through it. But honestly, I don't think that men go through it. I don't think that they have to explain the gap in the same way that women have to explain a gap in their career, right? And one of the things that stuck out that you said was, I was a stay-at-home mom and I was the co-chair. You listed all of these things that I have also been that are not easy either, that still require the same skills. You just did not get paid for it. And I always think if we strip away the titles and the companies and we just list out, these are all of the things that I've done, what would that resume look like? What jobs would I actually get because of that? And I'm curious, do you think that men kind of go through that same struggle, kind of that same lack of confidence as well? And maybe I'm just around a lot of really confident men, or maybe I just haven't, it's not that. I haven't seen a lot of vulnerable men who are like, I don't know what to do in this situation. And I run into more women that are like, I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm afraid to ask something.
Mm.
There's always a lot of I'm afraid to ask, I'm afraid to say. And I'm always like, just say it. Just say it. Because the more you say it, the more practice that you get. Do you think it is a difference between men and women in business?
I think there definitely is a difference between men and women. I think men are expected to have it all together all the time. Mm-hmm. And if they don't have it all together, which many, not everybody has it all together all the time. Let's be honest, we're all human. But I think that men are expected to, be leaders and have it all together and not be able to show vulnerability, because if they show vulnerability, are they going to be ridiculed in the workplace? Are they going to be seen as weak? Are they going to not get that promotion because they're asking too many questions, or they're making I don't know where to go with that from there. Can we cut that out?
No, we're not going to cut it out, because I totally agree. I don't think that it's interesting, right? Because in the same, because those are all the thought processes that I kind of go through. Like, well, so here's one of my truths. I am a crier. I cry over everything. I cry when I'm happy. I cry when I'm sad. I cry when I'm angry. I cry when I feel an emotion so deeply. And that will happen in business because I take my job very seriously. I take what I do very seriously. And I
Yeah.
only have 150, like, I only can go at 150%. And I wish that I knew how not to. I thank my mom all the time for that because I'm like, you did this to me. I am like a high achiever because of this. I love you, mom. She listens to the podcast. She knows what I'm talking about, right? Like, I feel all of those things. And I think that men also feel those things, but for totally different, like, they're different hurdles to go over, right? Where I'm trying to get over the hill, they are up the hill and they can't say that they're scared to go down the hill. Right. Like, so it's a really, I'm afraid of climbing the hill and having to prove it versus him trying to go down, down the hill and being like, I'm scared of it. So, I think that you bring up a really good point, and I won't cut it out because I do think that that's important, because I also, I've raised men,
Mm.
like, I have two boys and I want them to be vulnerable, and I want them to know that it's okay, because that makes you an empathetic person. It makes you an understanding person, right? And it's not a female trait. It is just a trait. And I think, like, sometimes I wish it could just be that, in the same way that I wish that we could strip away, titles and companies and just list out those things. We are all just feelings, emotions, and we all can execute on different things. So
Yeah, I
I'm
think we have
in
to give
agreement.
our men. I think we have to give men grace, and that, like you said, they're not allowed. Like, you cry, you can break down because you're sad or you're angry or you're happy. Men can't do that. They're not allowed to do that. It's not accepted like it is for women. And then also they're on at work, and then I know just from looking back at my marriage, like, I expected him to be on when he was home. Like, he walks
Yeah.
through the front door and it's like, okay, here you go. I've had enough today, and he didn't get any downtime. So I think it's really important that we just give men some space and grace, because
Yeah.
again, they are human. And if we took away some of the different, like, men and women are different, but
Yes.
it's also like, societal expectations of men versus societal expectations on women. And I don't always think that's fair, in regards to both men and
Yeah.
women. I think we need to give each other grace. But us, men in business, they always have to be, quote unquote, on and going. And they're not allowed to have those breakdowns. Like, if they have a bad day, they're not allowed to stop and, like, just take some time,
Yeah.
and I think they
Very,
need.
it's passive aggressive sometimes is really how it ends up coming out. And that's even more acceptable than crying, even though it can be hurtful. I do have just kind of one final question before my final question. And I would love your thoughts, opinions, and ideas on this. So, one of the things that I struggle with is the type of leader that I want to be and how I want to present myself. I want to be authentically me, which is, I'm not saying that I cry at the drop of a hat. I mean, I will cry at, like, America's Got Talent because I'm so happy for them. But, like, you know, yeah, right. But, like, I don't cry at the drop of a hat. I want to be a leader that's authentically me. And I don't want to have to be like this kind of, for lack of a better word, a masculine version of me. And masculine being like the tough, like, I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't want to be a bitch in order to be successful in leadership. And I'd love to know what your thoughts are on what that balance is of, like, I think you want to be authentic. I think that, like, but I don't want to be soft and gushy. I know that's not like a fully formed question, but do you get what I'm trying to ask?
I do. I do. Yeah, we don't have to be a bitch to be successful. I'm very, like, I always want to take care of my people and make sure that they're happy, because at the end of the day, if my organization is not, if my people aren't happy, my business isn't going to exist. That being
Yeah.
said, I think, we can have expectations, and I think that when we bring on team members or someone in our business, it's really important that we lay out expectations. And what are we, what are they expected to What is their role? What are the expectations we have for them, and vice versa? What do they want? What are their goals for
Yeah.
themselves in the business? Where do they see themselves growing and getting into and growing into and moving into? What do they want over the next 5 years if you're wanting them to be there long term? And having an open door policy where they can come in and, come to you, and also allowing people to make mistakes. I'm not saying they make the same mistake 3, 4, 5 times, but when
Yeah.
they do make a mistake, okay, what happened? Where's the, what worked, what didn't work? Where's the gap, and how do we fix this going forward? And also giving our people the, some empowering them and giving them, ownership, some type of ownership into whatever their role is. Where do they see, where can they, how do they want to see this develop and move into the future? So I think when those expectations and the roles are clearly defined, then we don't have to be like the bitchy boss. We can
Yeah.
actually, because when they have ownership, then it takes us kind of out of it, the responsibility of us out of it, because the responsibility and onus lies on them. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. I think it's really what I'm hearing you say is really structuring the environment so you don't have to be in a position that makes you either feel or you feel like you're pushed into that. And so I like that framework that you articulated, which is like, what are your expectations, setting the expectations, and honestly having that conversation and making sure you guys are clear on those expectations allows you to be or not have to be, like the bitch boss, which, some days you're going to have to be. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and then I know in business, like we have KPIs. There's numbers that we want to hit, right?
Yeah.
And so we measure everything through the KPIs. Same thing with your team. They should have like, what are the goals for, like they can set their own goals. What are your goals this month for your role or for your job, right? What are your goals that you're creating? And when they create the goals and then you like, okay, we're going to have a check-in at this point, whether it's once a week or once a month, and where are you at with those goals? When they're not meeting them consistently, they typically are going to wean themselves out
Yeah.
because they're going to see that they're not hitting their goals. So maybe they're not the right person for that specific role or that specific job. So kind of like, again, giving them ownership, giving them responsibility, setting up this structure where they can actually see what their numbers are or what their successes are or where the gap is. Eventually they're either going to, keep rising up or they're going to weed themselves out.
Couldn't agree more. Okay, now I'm ready for my final question. And my final question is, if you knew then what you know now, what is the advice that you give to yourself?
I would have done it scared sooner.
Oh, love that. Do it scared. Everyone listening, just do it scared.
You're not going to die.
Yeah, exactly. Learn from your life. Learn from your life, right, Heidi?
Yeah, exactly. Do it scared. That's the like very concise because we all have fear. And I also learned like now, since that, like looking back on that, whenever that feeling comes up, I now know that's my next cut. So I actually learned to embrace that feeling of when my throat closes, when my chest gets tight, when I start shaking or sweating, because the sweat immediately comes on. Not to mention I'm
Yeah.
also in menopause. But besides that, when the sweat comes on and that fear kicks in, I know I'm like, okay, because if I think about, should I do this? Should I not do this? I'm like, when that my body reacts in that way, I'm like, okay, that's a definite yes. I get to go here because that means that this is my next level or my next cut to up level and get me to the next place I want to go.
I love it. Those are great final words. Do it scared. Thank you so much for coming on here and just having such a great conversation. Like, I feel like we need more of these conversations to just kind of live out there in the ether. So I absolutely appreciate you being open and honest and authentically you.
I'm so grateful for you. Thank you for having me on. It's been such a pleasure and honor. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks. I hope that you found today's episode or the episode that you just listened to be really, uplifting and inspiring. It certainly was for me. I love getting on the line with someone and just really digging into questions that I have myself. And I'm hoping that, they've scratched the itch for you as well, too, when we've started the conversation. So let's dive into the key takeaways that I've got for today's episode. My first key takeaway is keep up to date to stay ahead, not to keep up with the Joneses. Now, during our conversation, we talked about just kind of embracing change and how doing so can give you a bit of an upper hand. I loved the idea of staying curious. That perspective puts a lot less pressure on. Sometimes when you're really trying to kind of stay up to date on the trends and trying to keep up with the Joneses, you can really miss the trees from the forest. Get a little uncomfortable, stay curious, and make connections, because you're not just trying to keep up with the Joneses, you're investing in yourself. And that is truly what it means to stay ahead. Number 2, there is value in mentorship. So we really talk a lot about mentorship in this episode. I personally have a very natural knee-jerk reaction to the word and the idea of mentorship. And while I was picking up what she was putting down, I also know that the investment of mentorship or coaching may not always be possible. But the value of finding someone to help you be kind of your guide is and can be incredibly helpful. Now, for Heidi, she believes it's an essential part in professional growth and sometimes even in overcoming barriers in business. And as a woman in business, I would be naive to tell you that I don't believe that that is possible too. I'm all about jumping those business hurdles, jumping over the business hurdles, not just jumping them. The takeaway I gleaned from her is find a mentor who can provide both strategic insights and emotional support. That is where you can really gain your strength. Key takeaway and final takeaway for this episode in number 3. Confidence is queen, or what I like to say also is royalty. Now, I think we all know this to be true, but if you're listening and a woman, we also know that sometimes building the confidence can be a challenge. Loved, obsessed that she talked about the importance of small, consistent actions that really validate your abilities and really foster a sense of achievement. When you embrace challenges, acknowledge fears, and face them, well, my friends, you've planted the seed of confidence. So let that little avocado tree grow. What does this look like in business? It may not be mentorship, but it is building a network of support and celebrating your wins, no matter what the size, and holding yourself accountable and knowing that there is strength in vulnerability. What did you take away from today's episode? I want to hear it. Let's keep this conversation going. A very special thank you to my podcast editor, Johnny Ike, and thanks to you for spending your time with me today. Until next time, may the conversation flow, the laughter linger, and the outlook remain optimistic but grounded in reality. This is Katya, signing off.